Welcome to the Your Mark on the World show with your champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
Our sponsor, Johnson & Johnson, matches most individual donations up to $250 at caringcrowd.org.
So with that said, we're excited to have Devin again today, and I would like to hand it over to him to take care of proceedings for the evening. Thank you, Devin.
Thank you, Devin.
Come on, Devin. Go ahead.
Hello. It is really an honor to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity. I call myself a champion of social good. I travel around the world as a volunteer, as a journalist, as a speaker occasionally. As a board contributor, I cover social entrepreneurship and impact investing, written 600 articles. I produced 1,200 episodes of my show, the Your Mark on the World show, over the years. And this conversation tonight will be recorded as a special episode of the show. I'm excited to share that. I kind of inform all of my work, leveraging my background as really a finance guy, as an impact investor, as an investment banker, as a past CFO, corporate treasurer. I even worked in the U.S. Senate Banking Committee staff back before any of you were born. I frequently find myself on airplanes, and I'm grateful to be middle seat sized, more or less. I am thrilled to be able to introduce our rock star panel tonight. Let me start by introducing in no particular order, completely at random. We'll start with Peter Felix. He is Peter, come on up. Peter is the Director of Inventory Control for the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank, a leading Southern California nonprofit. He has championed the use of technology in supply chain management, finance, and constituent relationship management to effectively manage the over 85 million pounds of food received and distributed annually by the food bank in Los Angeles. So please welcome Peter Felix. Next, let's welcome Masisak. She is the CEO of TechSoup. She joined the nonprofit in 2001 to launch its e-commerce donation platform, moving the organization from a local to a really a global impact player. In 2006, she founded TechSoup Global Network to scale the program's impact globally, becoming the CEO in 2012. She previously worked as a strategy consultant with Coopers & Lybrand and in leadership roles at several internet businesses. She holds an MBA from Columbia University Business School, named one of the most influential women of the Bay Area in 2017 by San Francisco Business Times, and co-leads the Bay Area Social Enterprise Leadership Forum. Please welcome Rebecca. Again, in no particular order, Margret Trilli is next on our list. Her 25-year career includes executive leadership and investment and operating roles for companies including Barclays Global Investors, Blackrock, and Charles Schwab. Currently, Margret is the President and Chief Investment Officer of ImpactAssets, where she recently led the firm through the $1 billion assets under management threshold. ImpactAssets advises philanthropists on their impact investing across the spectrum of asset classes and impact themes. The firm specializes in helping families and foundations set impact and investment strategies and realize them through their donor advised fund, which is dedicated to the catalyzation of impact investing. Margret graduated from the Stanford Graduate School of Business and holds a degree in economics from UC Santa Barbara. I think that's the wrong UC if we're sitting here.
I didn't get into Anderson.
I'm glad none of us were carded on the way in. Our final panelist, and the tall. I almost forgot. Thank you for remembering. Gunnar Lovelace is our final panelist and the tallest. He is an active impact investor and and operator focused on creating scalable examples of business as a force for good. His last company, Thrive Market, has competed successfully in the massive $1 trillion U.S. grocery market against the likes of Amazon and many others, has millions of users and over 700 employees, has raised over $200 million until recently another 40, and is the first e-commerce company to go zero waste from distribution center to landfill. He was the founder of that company. He's now the founder and CEO of GoodMoney, which is a conscious mobile banking company where every customer becomes an owner over time. So I'm excited to be a customer owner. So please welcome Gunnar. What's your name in the second row, or the second row of people?
Oh, I'm Nathaniel.
Nathaniel,
Yes.
I am so thrilled that you are here.
Saving the world.
Just do not leave. Do not leave. Whatever you do, stay. If you need more wine or something, go ahead, get up.
I had a good nap.
Okay, that's the key. Good now. Okay. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. Not just Nathaniel, we're thrilled to have you. Let's jump in. Gunnar, I want to start with you. All the top VCs rejected Thrive Market. Can you share what you learned and why it worked?
Sure. Is this still working? Yeah, cool. Yeah, so we were rejected and said, how are you going to compete in a hyper-competitive $2 trillion grocery market against the likes of multiple players with $1 billion in sales, and then there's Amazon, and there's a bunch of ways to measure the success of the business. We're a top 10 sales channel for 90% of the brands that we carry, all the brands you would see at Whole Foods, for example. And I think, for me, I would, there's a bunch of ways to answer that question. I think, when I speak to a room of entrepreneurs, I always say, do what you love, because that gives you the fortitude to never accept no's. And if you really believe in what you're doing, you have the strength and fortitude to fight through a bunch of rejections. And in our case, it was actually really the best thing that happened to us, because it forced us to capitalize the business in a very stakeholder-driven way. And we ended up bringing in 500 bloggers as investors, and the first $8 million of capital came in through very aligned distribution partners. So it was a very, if we had been successful in raising capital in the kind of more traditional venture route initially, we would have ended up not building that competency, which ended up being an incredibly important educational journey for me personally, which was how to align incentives with a really broad network of distributed stakeholders as a way of building the consumer brand very, very quickly.
Excellent. Thanks, Gunnar. Rebecca, you're doing something that is so interesting and unique. Tell us a little bit how your direct public offering for your nonprofit will ensure that TechSoup continues to advocate on behalf of civil society around the world. What's the connection?
Well, I think it would be good maybe to just say a few words about what TechSoup is, because it probably is not known by everyone. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, but we're really a network of 61 international NGOs who work together on a mission to be a dynamic bridge to really help technology be something that is supporting connections and innovation for a more equitable planet. And we have a set of stakeholders. We're a multi-sided platform and marketplace. And the stakeholders include more than 1 million organizations who are working in civil society. And they may be libraries, they may be NGOs, they may be charities, they have different forms, social enterprises even in some cases. And then we're working with 100 corporations who have technology offers and 200 foundations, just to make it possible for people to find the resources they need, afford them, have purpose-built solutions. And we want to take that to a new level of really helping people have more visibility into the activities of a magnificent but also messy sector that is, what the social sector is, and to make sure that they really have the resources they need, the digital skills, the functional skills as well as the technical skills and the software and services and solutions to really change the way they deliver their services in a true digital transformation kind of model. So that's what we do, and that's where we're aiming. But of course, to do that, we scaled somewhat to this point because, like I said, we've served a number of organizations, and we have services available in 236 countries and territories. But in order to really kind of take that to the next level and upgrade our own systems, as well as how we're able to connect people and help them really collaborate to innovate, we needed to have investment. And so that investment capital was part of a growth capital campaign that also included a direct public offering, as Devin mentioned. And it's an $11.5 million campaign. Why did we decide to do a direct public offering? You know, we did a Reg A plus Tier 2 type offering in all 50 states. If there was such a thing as a global securities kind of offer, we would have done a global offering, honestly, but it was complicated enough just doing it in the US. And we chose to do that because we were looking for engagement. We wanted to democratize who was an impact investor and not only think of impact investing as something for wealthy people. And we thought, who cares more about impact than the people working in the sector, right? But they typically don't make much. So we set up 3 tiers of investors. So we have the top level tiers has a minimum of a $50,000 investment. And then we have a middle tier of a minimum of a $2,500 investment, and then a bottom tier of a $50 investment. And that was a kind of a difficult thing to sell because it's difficult to do that in an economically feasible way. And there's really not a lot of infrastructure for handling these kind of impact investments. And so that's a little bit about our direct public offering. Hopefully I answered the question.
Yeah, it is just fascinating. And if you get a few minutes, I mean, obviously, you're already thinking follow-up questions for Gunnar and Rebecca now, but we'll stick around. We've all vowed a vow to stay until 8:30. So, Margret, I want to just step back a little bit with you and have you set the table for us just a little bit. Why is technology so important to solving social issues?
Yeah, that's a big question. Well, Devin described what ImpactAssets does. We're essentially a $1 billion impact investor. We this year we'll put to work over $100 million in funds and companies doing social good across 150 different deals. So we see a lot of deal flow. So I'm be speaking today on behalf of all of our investments. And our investors, our donor advisors. We do the investments that our donors recommend to us. So we invest across all kinds of impact themes. And many of our investors are looking to solve systemic problems, big, hairy problems. And technology is often able to solve the problem of access, which is, you're able to leapfrog the absence of infrastructure in foreign countries. So you see a company like Evo, which sells local service plans in Africa, and they have 70% margins, and they're able to push out education for the 0 to 3 parents, which is a super important part of not just educating and growing children, but also educating about birth control and population control. And if you know anything about climate change and all of the causes and solutions, population control is a really big part of that. So a lot of really systemic solutions addressed in that one simple company. Another really interesting systemic problem is around the adoption of cleaner technologies, green technologies, and alternative energies. And one of the bigger things that's preventing the adoption pace to really, really accelerate is the absence of shared data. So everybody knows how their particular system is working in their particular climate, environment, longitude, latitude, but it would be fantastic if there was a database that had all of that data collected, so through AI you could actually discern what are the optimal environments and how do you optimize this particular system based on what you learned from the others. So a company called Provine is actually set up to do that. They're collecting, it's actually an exchange modeled after the NASDAQ or any of these others. So you contribute your IoT data, and eventually they'll get to the energy space. Right now they're focused on the automotive industry, so they're collecting vehicle data. And that's chugging through AI algorithms to help with autonomous driving, and so that that space develops and grows faster and safer, and we get ahead of all of the issues of technology that gets adopted too quickly. So these are super important applications of technology to problems that actually have nothing to do with tech. And so those are, I think, some of the most interesting investments we do.
Those are interesting examples, and I think you got more up your sleeve, Margaret, so I'm sure people will want to talk to you. Peter, you really work in a super high impact context as running a supply chain for feeding hungry people. That's a pretty good job. But as you think about the processes required to implement new technologies, what are the guidance that you would give people who are thinking about tackling an implementation?
One, I think you really need to have a strategy of where you want to go, kind of a roadmap. The nonprofit sector, most of the technology has definitely been on the development side to raise more money, and the side that implements the mission maybe has fallen up a little short on technology. So as you think of, with the roadmap, what comes into play next is you need some change management, because there's going to be a big culture shift with everyone at the nonprofit. For example, the LA Regional Food Bank, I've been there 5 years. When I started, we were taking orders over the phone. Who takes orders over the phone nowadays? So what you would think is simple as online ordering was a big culture change, and that technology, there are employees there that very, very powerfully feel about the mission. You need to consider their feelings for that, train them. At the same time, you have project management where you follow up on the details. So change management, implement things in phases, have some early successes early on so everyone buys in. In the beginning, it's additional work, and surprisingly, people at nonprofits may not be highly compensated, but they love the work they do. So take that into consideration when they have this upheaval with technology. I know Margaret mentioned Internet of Things, AI, machine learning. That's coming to our blockchain. That's coming to our nonprofit world, and we need to have the roadmap and have previous successes before we tackle those. We are, Gunnar mentioned the competitive landscape of grocery. We're an extension of our donors, which are Amazon, Walmart, and Target. We're expected to be just another link of that supply chain. So we need to be ready. If they do blockchain, if Walmart does blockchain on produce, with lettuce, if there's a recall, we need to be a part of that, be ready to react.
Now, the opportunities and challenges around tech in the nonprofit space are daunting in a way because of the resource constraints that are a little different, if we're being honest. As much as any organization feels a resource constraint, it's a little bit worse or a little more challenging in a nonprofit. I want to drill down on this question of the roadmap, Peter, because you were talking about the need. How does an organization know when they need a roadmap, and how do they, tell us a little bit more about how you actually create that roadmap for an implementation?
One thing I've learned is I know what I don't know, and I know if I don't know how to do a roadmap, I get help. In the nonprofit sector, what's amazing is other nonprofits in your field have already done this. So reach out to them. We're using an implementation partner that is going to kind of lay out our current technology, where we want to go, what it's going to take to get there, and what's changing in the nonprofit sector. Things have been given to us, donated to us, which is great, and we'll say yes, but maybe it's not part of a cohesive strategy going forward. So the roadmap is in conjunction with the strategy we present to our board. We're custodians with our mission, and work with others that's their expertise. Our expertise is dealing with the food, getting it to those in need. There's other people who do that. Work with them, partner with them.
Great, thank you, Peter. Margret, you gave us a few minutes ago a couple of great examples of tech for good.
Mm-hmm.
As you think about the most interesting application of technology to solve a systemic problem, what comes to mind for you?
There's a couple. One of my favorite new technologies, it's a dynamic duo of two women who, one is a serial entrepreneur and the other one is actually an investor who's gone into operate. And they're tackling the problem of clinical trials. They're really only available to the top 1% wealthy people who are connected to the top 1% doctors in the top 1% hospitals. And the information just doesn't get out there. And the majority of people are very remote. So people who desperately need life-saving treatments can't get them. And also, Big Pharma is spending tons of money to get a very demographically, monotonous group of samples. And so these technologies, these new therapies don't actually get really robust data results, and often people drop out. So Hawthorne Effect has created this platform for sharing clinical trials. And not only do you have the ability to search and discover clinical trials to address your issue, but they also send out people to collect the data from you and make sure they visit with you every week. They have a network of what they call heroes who work remotely across the country, even in the most remote locations, to collect blood samples, which has increased patient retention by 80%. And clinical trial success by 80%, something like 85%. So now that the trials are successful, more people are getting the therapies, there are more diverse sample bases, and it's really solving a gigantic issue through a pretty simple technology solution, and of course using remote technologies to help technicians in the market. So that's one of my favorites. That one's getting quite a bit of traction. And then Distilled Analytics is another one. It's a favorite of mine. It's a group out of MIT that has developed, again, AI and a machine learning platform that looks at bank and ATM data instead of credit card information to create a credit rating for people. And so many people are left out of their banking system because you have to have credit in order to get a credit rating. And if you've never been able to do that, or if you've never been a student on a campus where they were egregiously handing you something at 27%, it's really difficult to get started in credit. So they're able to create a credit rating just by your spending habits, by where they're seeing you shop, how much you're spending. They can tell how people are doing or thriving from a financial perspective. And it's an answer for opening up the credit market or financial services market to all the millions of people that are left out of our banking system. So that's another one of my favorites. And there's a lot of companies working on that same problem. I think it's an important one to solve.
That's fantastic. That relates directly, or at least closely, to what Gunnar is doing with his new company, GoodMoney. And we're probably not going to be able to spend as much time on that as we'd like tonight. But Gunnar, at Thrive Market, you build positive externalities into the model at Thrive Market. And I wonder if you would talk a little bit about how you've been able to do that as part of a way of building a really super successful business, that is also having positive impact.
Yeah. So I mean, I think when I think about building consumer brands really quickly in large competitive markets, both as an investor, being very active, and also as an operator, I always try to figure out if I can play to people's self-interest on economic terms and connect people to a better world in a durable, long-term, sustainable, defensible way with sustainable unit economics. And if I can do both of those things, if I can compete on price and convenience and virtues and values, it's just a better product, right? So like, we beat and compete with Amazon on price, but we connect people to a better world through the transparency of our supply chain, our community, our activism, our giving program. And so I think that's a really that's been a very simple organizing principle that I have used both in my own investing and my operating in terms of how do you build very scalable consumer brands in very, very large competitive markets, which is, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how well intentioned people are if you can't play to their self-interest and virtues and values in a sustainable, durable way. It's very, very hard to compete. So that's like kind of a precursor to that question. And then I think, obviously one of the challenges of modern day capitalism is that the prices that we pay are not reflected in the true cost of the things that we buy. And so our job is to make investments in our businesses where we build positive externalities into the architecture of those things in massive markets, so that as those businesses grow, all of the stakeholders, including people and the planet, benefit from those kind of positive externalities. And that the nominal additional cost of that investment in the positive externality can be arbitraged in the form of greater customer loyalty. And that's a very, very simple way of thinking about how do we use the power of capitalism as a way to kind of building positive externalities that are very intentional, and that those investments can be used as a way of competing in very, very large markets, and using those kinds of investments as a form of deep customer loyalty. There's 1,000 places where you can buy a fleece jacket, and Patagonia's business booms. Why? Because they provide a great product, but they also connect people to a higher purpose.
That is fascinating. Thinking about my fleece jacket portfolio right now. Sorry, I'm easily distracted. No one put any pie in front of me at all, or would this still run completely off the rail? Rebecca, how does TechSoup enable technology for good?
Well, we do things that a lot of different things. So we have, as I mentioned, these relationships with corporations, which we make it easy for them to either straight up donate or to offer discounts or special programs for charitable organizations. And we do that in a way. We have a model where we are monetizing that with the sector, but in a very affordable way. So we are vetting the eligibility of organizations, and the donors can kind of outsource that aspect of what they do. And we can help connect and do the outreach and do the support and create extra value-added services around it. Like we have a learning platform, TechSoup courses, where they can go and learn that way. We have webinars, we have lots of events. And some of them are around using those particular products, but sometimes they're just around general skills like media and digital literacy. And sometimes we're doing that at a local community level. And that is part of what is different, I think, in the nonprofit sector. You have large organizations doing things, but there are a lot of, it's really a services sector, and it's a did I do that?
Oh, you did it.
But it's a giant services sector. It's like something like close to the economy of Germany. Or the construction industry, I think, worldwide. But it's just made up of a long tail of a lot of small organizations. And sometimes I'll hear people say, why are there so many nonprofits? There shouldn't be. People are kind of looking from outside in, but when you need to take your elderly parent for services, or your disabled child, right? It's going to be someplace local probably that you're going to do that. So I think the power of technology, and in particular new technologies, model behind it, and they can choose then to also make some of that information shareable, still protecting privacy when they need to, following HIPAA laws, for example. And I think this kind of collaboration, which today, there's innovation going on, but it's kind of in silos, right? It's not a very, Lucy Bernholz from Stanford had an interesting article talking about it being a kind of an uncoordinated innovation. And I think there's the possibility with some solutions that are purpose-built for the sector and kind of common practices. It's possible for lots of small entities to do things in a similar way that then, is fostering this kind of more insight because you have more data or more practices. So we're working on all of those different angles. Some of it is value-added services and educational services. Some of it is just helping people find each other who are doing common activities, building community around various aspects of how technology can be used for good or for bad. In some places, it's being used, as we know, for people are using Google AdWords for nefarious purposes, for disinformation and things like this. And we have in some places in our network, partners are training organizations to be able to use those tools better themselves so that they can, if they're trying to, say, protect a vulnerable population, like at-risk women who are foreigners in a country from predatory males who may want to, connect with them in ways that we would want them to be vulnerable to. They can use that same Google AdWords to attract those gentlemen, if you want to refer to them as gentlemen, to actually get educated and connected to things they weren't expecting to be connected to with the same search terms that they're using, right? So there's some pretty interesting and exciting things that can happen, but it does require access to those basic tools, and that's something that doing it in a platform way enables, and it also requires ideas and imagination for what you can do before you can build a roadmap, right? You have to have some notion of what you need to achieve and what tools will help you do it. But the tools today are so, the problems have changed. You don't have to build your own CRM, but you do have to know of the 250 available, which one should you use, and you do have to understand that if your data is all separated because you've been grant funded and you've got all these separate systems to support separate projects, you're not going to get out of your CRM what the salesperson has told you you can do. It's not going to be able to do it. So those are some of the issues that we try to address in our model.
There is just so much to talk about, but Rebecca, you spend 100% of your waking time, or nearly, in this tech for good space. I mean, you're just there. It's just where you live. What is the innovation that you see happening in this space? What gets you excited?
It's an interesting question. A lot of things get me genuinely excited, right? And I'm excited by every individual organization that's doing something meaningful, and there are many of them, whether they're, I was in Colombia last year with an organization who's a human services organization who had implemented Microsoft Office 365. Doesn't sound exciting in a way, right? But for them, it was life-changing because, as you were saying, you need to have cultural change when you implement technology. And what they found was they expected that they were just updating their office productivity systems, but what they discovered was that the parents of the children that they were trying to reach were communicating differently, and the children were communicating differently with the staff, and they were all gaining more insights because they were working in a more collaborative platform. So I think, every time I go somewhere and I hear about either the challenges or what organizations have done, and there's just so many causes in the world, and it's not getting any easier in the world we live in. So I'm very motivated by that. Now, I'll say what we do is infrastructure, it's plumbing, it's not that exciting. It doesn't sound very exciting sometimes, right? But I'm a systemic thinker, and I like solving problems, and I stayed here a long time because it's just hard and it never gets that much easier, but it's satisfying because of the people that are actually benefiting from the services, and that's what motivates me, and I want to foster a lot of activity and innovation and better connection there.
But you hit on something really important, Rebecca, and I just want to highlight that. I think tech entrepreneurs, we oftentimes get really excited about flashy things, right? And yet most tech is really under, its infrastructure, right? We don't see it. We in this room don't use it. It's not an app, at least it's not a consumer-oriented app on a phone. So Peter, I want to come to you because that's the world you live in as well. It's the infrastructure, it's the logistics. And as you're seeing and thinking about things that are going on in that space, what is getting you excited? What are the cool new things that are being developed for the good of humanity behind the scenes where you work?
Well, what's getting me excited, my background, supply chain, demand planning, forecasting, is the connectivity in the nonprofit world, especially we have a physical product, food, the LA Regional Food Bank. We partner with 600 agencies and schools who give food to individuals. Those agencies could be soup kitchens, pantries. Then we work with donors. I mentioned, Amazon, USDA. That's a whole nother animal. And then there's a whole other network of food banks. And I see the technology where our supply and demand and inventories are connected, where if a pantry managing their inventory could communicate to us electronically through data that they will need to place a new order, I can review my inventory. I can see incoming receipts or donations from Amazon or Walmart or the USDA. I can also, my inventory can be shared with another network of food banks where I think we were talking earlier, about 40% of the food that's grown in the US ends up in the landfill. A lot of that actually ends up laying fallow in the farms, where I could connect to a food bank in southern Arizona, and there's an abundance of tomatoes at the Arizona-Mexico border that are just gonna, we've used water to grow those, and they're just gonna lay in the ground. Well, they can communicate the supply they have. If that meets with the demand, we can get a truckload over to LA. I can have it in my inventory. I could turn it. I could give it to an agency who can give it to a family or children, and that food is being put to use after all the resources that have been invested in it. So that's technology that connects all that together, where it's streamlined and all the employees of the food bank and in our network can use that. That's what really gets me excited.
Well, good reason. Holy cow, all you're doing is saving lives and the planet all in one breath. So that's a pretty good start. Margret, I want you, no pressure, but I'm hoping you can really hit a home run on this one. This is the one I'm hoping that everyone will go home and they'll tell someone they love about what they saw tonight, and they're going to talk about your answer to this question. So what is the flat out sexiest tech for good innovation you've seen?
Oh my gosh. Like you, I get excited about lots of things. I really geek out at the intersection of science and tech. So one of our most exciting recent investments was our investment in Beyond Meat, which recently IPO'd. And that's plant-based meat. But one of the other companies in a prior life I seeded, makes protein powder from bacteria, and now we're making it from air. And I know, like, well, I know. And there's plenty of other companies that are making plastics from bacteria, and like that stuff just is amazing to me. I also am fascinated by the companies that are sort of following the whole biomimicry movement and the study of nature to solve some of these problems. And One of the companies I invested in quite a while ago observed that standing water gets contaminated, moving water does not. And so it's not as commonly used as you would think in the water purification industry to keep the water moving as opposed to just using chemicals. And so all kinds of mixers are now coming online, and my favorite ones are the ones that have studied bees and the way that they fly through space to design the mixer, you know, unlike a fan, but more like this spiral, they call it the lily impeller, but it looks more like something that goes like this. So it's a fascinating way to see the water move that way. It does move through like this, like a spiral. So just fascinating things to me, and that takes, the amazing innovation about that is that it takes a tenth of the energy. So with a tiny panel at the top of a giant water tank, you can power this thing. Enough to keep the water pure without the use of any chemicals. So this is the kind of thing I geek out. I don't think anybody's going to want to talk about this.
You go home and you tell your loved ones about the spiraling water. Gunnar, you suggested that there's an equity arbitrage going on at the Thrive market. And tell us how that informs what you're doing now with GoodMoney.
Yeah, so because after being rejected by VCs, we brought in all of these stakeholders, bloggers, influencers, publishers, consumer nonprofits, made many of them as early investors up to 50x on their capital. A very simple, powerful model that where we pay the publisher $50 in equity for every customer that they bring us. It's twice as much as they would get on a cash basis in an equivalent e-commerce affiliate marketplace. Investors would hear this and initially say, oh, that sounds really negative and inflationary. You're diluting the cap table, you're issuing $50 in new securities. But in fact, it's massively accretive because we get $1,500 in market cap appreciation from the capital markets for that customer that we paid $50 in equity. It's a 30x arbitrage. And that model was so successful at Thrive, there were many quarters that we had to tell our publishing partners to stop promoting because every 300,000 users per month, we have warehouses and thousands of supply chains. And then because that worked so well, we set up an investment acceleration ecosystem where we've been able to do it for a dozen conscious consumer brands. We take larger positions. All of those brands are booming, the first of which we sold in December, less than 3 years in for $230 million. Same model, just arbitraging equity. So as I went through that process of being educated on how to align incentives across distributed stakeholders to build consumer brands in really large markets very quickly, just as an impact-oriented human being, the two places that I've been very interested in my life is our relationship with food and our relationship with money. Two of kind of the most fundamental issues that I think we face in terms of the problems and opportunities that we face as a species. And so in the context of money, I knew that we could drive millions of Americans to a conscious mobile banking solution like GoodMoney with these publishers that we had made a lot of money for. But as I started to really analyze it, I was like, why wouldn't we make customers owners? Why wouldn't we give them the ability to participate in the upside? Why wouldn't we unlock the same kind of rapid engagement dynamics that we had seen from publishers at even greater scale across consumers? And as I started to create some economic game theory models around it, sounds very simple when you say it out loud, but if you look at any major consumer brand in capitalism, the value of that brand comes from people buying from it. So why shouldn't consumers expect to own the businesses they buy from for just being the consumer? And capitalism just literally hasn't evolved that way. We thought the world was flat for hundreds of years until we didn't. Capitalism has evolved the way it has until we change it. And our view is that there's a really historic opportunity to kickstart an ownership economy, much the same way that, say, Uber, Lyft, and Airbnb have leveraged a gig economy that we can use and empower our customers and distribute ownership incentives much in the same way. So if you look at consumer fintech, there's a lot of unicorns in the space and they achieve $1,000 to $2,000 of market cap value per customer. And so why wouldn't we share some of that value back to the customer and still be on the right side of that arb trade. And so there's a very unusual orientation around it. There's a whole bunch of like economic game theory, consumer psychology, and then Reg A Jobs Act pieces that we've had to deal with. But that is a perfect example of unintended consequences from being rejected by VCs initially at Thrive Market that led to a whole cascade of positive externalities, which, that's the beauty of the entrepreneurial journey.
Excellent. Nathaniel, I'm going to give you the first question. I'm going to ask each of them one more question, but I want you to be thinking of your question, and then we'll have time for a few other questions, so you can all be thinking, but Nathaniel gets the first go. I'm very excited for Nathaniel's question, but Rebecca and Gunnar, I'm going to ask you a completely unfair question, but I am just fascinated by your respective capital raises. You both have been or are, raising money. And in fact, you've been swimming in some of the same water with using, Jobs Act rules from 2012 to raise money. I wonder, maybe Rebecca, we could start with you, and then we'll give Gunnar a chance. But I want you each to try to contrast those two offerings, what you've been doing at Gunnar at Thrive, what you've been doing at TechSoup, and just talk about how those things are similar and different from your standpoint. Rebecca, go ahead.
Well, that's a little difficult because I'm not sure that I understood a lot of things you said.
It's an unfair question.
But I will say that I definitely hear some similarities from the point of view of although we did set out to raise money with this DPO, we set out to raise engagement. And we had the feeling that I didn't want, TechSoup as a resource to the sector to really be owned by the big tech companies, even though we're not really owned by anybody, but I didn't want to be over-controlled that way. And I really wanted to empower the nonprofit organizations to really feel like they were owners and that they could tell us what they wanted and that they could be part of the returns on the activity that was getting supported there. So that, it also was a way to signal because we were being digitally disrupted and we can't go by what makes the most sustainable organization for us. We have to be relevant to what is needed by the sector. So the model was really about, engagement. The other comment I'll make, which may not really go to your question, Devin, is, I think the kind of combination of not giving up when you really believe in something, even when you have obstacles, that's also very much resonates in my and our experience. But also, you can learn so much from other people. So when you engage a lot of stakeholders, and in our case, we have a lot of stakeholders, and we learn from all of them, the corporations, the foundations, as well as the nonprofits. And I think that was another common thread in the story, but maybe not necessarily the model. But yeah, so I don't know how well that addressed the question, but did my best.
Thank you. Gunnar, what's your take on that compare and contrast?
Well, I liked your answers. I think I've been fascinated by DPOs, and it's a very hot area of conversation in general, just because the kind of traditional IPO structure is dominated by Wall Street insiders. So I think there's a lot of interesting aspects of that we have yet to penetrate capitalism fully. And I think Thrive was a Reg D, so it wasn't even a Reg A. This is my first time into the Reg A capital formation world, and we're not using it to raise actual capital. We're just using it as a way of sharing value with customers for the value that they create as a customer.
And GoodMoney.
I think I probably have a lot that I could learn from you on the DPO side.
And I think what you just said would be an interesting thing for the next thing, sharing it back.
If you guys should meet up later.
So, Margret, you're a full-time investor. And Oh my gosh, I mean, you heard me talk about Margret, and all of these people are just rock stars, and we're all honored to be in the same room with them. But, you know, you got $1 billion that you're managing right now. Comment on these two offerings and how you and the investors you work with and represent think about these sorts of offerings.
Well, the kind of investors that come to us are the ones who like to do the crazy, complicated, weird things, and no one else will touch those things. They come to us because we always get to yes. We find a way to structure those deals. So I'm a little bit in a yes bubble. So we would love both of those deals, but we do straight equity and straight debt, but we also have impact investors who are funding financial innovation, period, and who are looking for unique structures like these, and also will take interesting positions. So they'll seed the first 10% of loans, which will unlock the 90% bank loan, right? So they're happy to be first in on that. Or many of our investors are market rate investors, so they're not expecting concessionary returns. Some will take first losses, which de-risks the deals significantly, so that other capital with not as great a risk tolerance can come in to those deals. And there's many of our clients are philanthropists, and many of the foundations have some constraints and restrictions that they have to invest within. And so they structure those as program-related investments that are just below market, and so some of these are a great fit for that.
Excellent. Excellent. So, Peter, I'm going to ask you the last question before we turn the time over to Nathaniel. In your world, if you're going to pay for tech, you've got to get a grant. And I realize it's not your job probably to be the one primarily responsible to raise that money, but certainly if someone's going to write a grant, the LA Regional Food Bank for tech, you're going to be in the room at some point. What's the pitch you would make for tech investments in the food bank?
Well, one, I will contradict what you said, that
Please.
I do ask for it. It used to be, again, taking control of the roadmap of what we need. The food bank is set up, we have like 30,000 volunteers that come in, we have donors, we have grant writers, we're a food distribution company, and we have 30 vehicles making deliveries. We have a team that gets donations from all these other organizations. We're out there with schools, and then we're now in community colleges, all these food pantries, kitchens. If I need technology to make an impact, I don't need to wait for a grant writer to come to me with something they reviewed and, hey, it may be good for our department. I can learn where those grant opportunities are. It's up to me to develop a relationship with the development team. I can cultivate my own relationships with donors or people that want to contribute to the food bank. So I don't need to wait. And it's led to a lot of successes. The more you ask, probably the more no's, but you're going to get more yeses. And then ultimately the pitch is understanding we're still on my side, I'm on the operation and expense side. So if I can go to a grant writer or a foundation or a donor, and these monies will enable, this technology will enable us to become more efficient with their donation, to make more impacts, to reach more people. We're considering working with Salesforce. There's an implementation partner for that, and if I can better understand our customers to reach a certain demographic you want, if it's seniors or children or more nutritious food, more produce, and I need technology to do that, here's the cost of it, and let's get it done. Let's kind of bring there's nothing wrong with a private market attitude to reach a goal, and technology is a tool.
Perfect. I'm so excited. Now we're going to find out what Nathaniel's question is, okay? Let's fire away, man.
Hey, I just want to say thank you very much, by the way. Like, I'm really inspired because I kind of feel like I connect with all of you in certain different things. So one thing, that I've had my personal experience with is, kind of trying to start my own entrepreneurship businesses is burnout, and, there's the company and everything, but you guys are in positions where a lot of people look up to you and are waiting for your decisions, and how do you, keep yourself sane enough to make healthy decisions?
That's great. Right? I'll take a turn. Just go down the road. Start with Rebecca.
I don't think I qualify as sane, really, for the most part. I think in my case, I'm a very high energy person. I'm a very intense person, and always was that way, and always hardworking, not because someone wanted me to be hardworking, but because I was into what I was doing, and I basically don't do things I don't believe in, right? So that helps, I think. Everyone doesn't have that luxury, obviously. But I think that, it's a little bit about kind of recognizing when you have the signs of, you're getting irritable about one thing after another, and you kind of realize it might not be everyone else, it might be you. Time to take a break, and sometimes your breaks can be really, you think you need 3 months off, but if you just have an hour or a couple of hours, you can rejuvenate a bit. So I don't have any real big answer there, other than to say it's kind of about knowing yourself a bit, and also surround yourself with great people. And we've got a couple of staff members here tonight, but TechSoup is a place of we have about 230 people, and then another 100 who work in this network with us, and they're all super dedicated and smart, and just great to work with, and that brings me energy too.
Go ahead, Margret.
Well, work-life balance is something I've always struggled with for the same reasons. I just love my work, and it's before my husband, that's all I did. I was married to my job. And now that I have kids, things have changed because I want to be as good a mom as I am in everything else, and that has really changed my perspective and has become a priority for me. I still struggle with it, but the other thing I have going for me is focus, and I am able to be very present when I'm not working, and I have, at least at this stage, I have control over my time. So I do block out time to be done at 5, or sometimes it's 3, because I want to pick them up and take them somewhere, and then I'm back on at 8 when they're asleep. And I think we're getting to a place where the way we work now is embracing that. We're a very virtual company. We have people in Bethesda, Maryland, and New York, and in San Francisco. I'm on Zoom all day long on video conferences. And I start very early, sometimes I get late, but it's on my terms, at least at this point, and I don't have any trouble taking those periods off to recharge that way. And like you, I do find times, especially in entrepreneurship, because there are times when everything's going for you, and it's like a high like no other. It's so energizing, and then a couple of things go wrong, and you're questioning everything. And those are the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. It's really hard, and I would just say the thing to remember is they're all phases, and enjoy the good ones, and let those ride, and reflect on those during the bad ones, during those tough phases. And it's okay to question. I think you find yourself getting some good insights on things maybe you should be doing differently or thinking about differently, and I always find myself more convicted that what I'm doing is the right thing and for the right reasons. So those are important periods too, and they're there for a reason, I think.
Peter? Side, I know in food banking, when Hurricane Katrina hit in New Orleans, a lot of volunteers went down there to help, and massive undertaking. From that, when it was all done, the food banking and Red Cross and Feeding America, they took a look back. What are some lessons learned? And they also picked up a lot of people left the nonprofit sector out of that. And the analysis is there wasn't proper preparation and a plan. And that comes into leadership of your team and your group, that if something like that happens, what's the plan? What resources are going to be available? What are you going to do? I know in Los Angeles we're very conscious of an earthquake. We've had some stress tests recently with food coming from the USDA. Everyone's aware, maybe we're not, trade relations with China aren't what they were a few years ago. A lot of that food is being purchased by the USDA and is coming to food banks. So we've increased by 25% in 1 year. The USDA is giving us resources for that, but it's a stress test that donations are going to come in if we have a natural disaster. What is our plan for it? And that comes into leadership. And we're going to have some failures, but if you're prepared for it and you know what to do, you've taken that stress away, and that is going to help hopefully with the burnout. So kind of knock on wood that I will not have to test those out anytime soon, but that's something we're preparing for.
Cool. So I don't really think work-life balance exists. I think balance is a fallacy in general, right? So I think it's more like equilibrium, which is dynamic tension passing through the balance point. And
It's a good quote. Yeah, it's a good quote.
It's the one I tell myself all the time as I'm like navigating that roller coaster. I think people is the most durable way of managing that, right? So culture is the internal facing aspect of the brand, and how you build very durable high performance organizations is a way that you can really bolster yourself over time. And if you look at companies in equal markets selling equal products at equal prices, the ones that produce the most consistent returns are ones with great culture and high performance organization. And so finding great people obviously is very, very hard. And I get my ass kicked in that one all the time. It's you just kind of, in that context, I find that you just have to really learn how to listen and take the time to thoroughly vet people appropriately. And then small hacks, like right before I got here I was late because I took a 15-minute power nap. I was crashing, and I'm a big believer in power naps. So I have a napping room in every one of my companies, and I have fought fiercely to protect those things, and I am a regular user of them. So we all find little ways to take care of ourselves. I really like what you said about if you find yourself consistently being irritated with others, it is a symptom of something being wrong with oneself, which is, I think, generally the nature of life in general. Right? So all of our projections and judgments about each other are unresolved aspects for ourselves. So, yeah, great, thank you.
Nathaniel, you win the night. Best question of the night. Thank you very much for your love for the panel. That's great question. This has been a great discussion, especially if you take my part of it out. These guys are great.
He's awesome.
No, they didn't fall asleep once. None of you did either. You've been watching. Thank you very much. It's been a great evening, and again, everybody vowed to stay until 8:30. That was part of their contract. So it looks to me like there's at least some Diet Coke left. Stick around and we'll visit with you. So if you have more questions, and I'm sure you all do, don't leave. Visit. Thank you.
At Caring Crowd, we believe everyone has the power to make a difference. Through our crowdfunding platform for community health, We empower passionate people to drive real change. Whether you work for a nonprofit organization, volunteer, or want to get involved for the first time, you can post a campaign on Caring Crowd. Join us, because caring is where change begins.
Thanks for tuning in to the Your Mark on the World show, the Social Impact Podcast. Please subscribe via YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or Spotify.